From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I am Dan Harary, broadcasting in living color from my office in Beverly Hills, California. For those of us who have been mourning the loss of Earl Grey Anderson this past week, it's been difficult. He was a lovely man. He was the head of Southern California MUFON, and he was our friend and our colleague, and we all miss him. We've been doing tributes to him this past week on various podcasts, many of us. So rest in peace, my brother, Earl Grey Anderson. We miss you. Okay, today I have a fun guest. She's a friend of mine, and I will read her little bio now. With an eye on the cosmos, the world beyond our own has always been a fascination for Chrissy Newton. From UFOs and astronomy to ancient civilizations, her curiosity is as limitless as the universe. By day, she's the founder of the PR agency called Vocab, V-O-C-A-B, Vocab Communications, based in Toronto. By night, she hosts and produces a space, science, futurism, and UFO-themed podcast called Rebelliously Curious with Chrissy Newton. Is that not a great title for a show? Rebelliously Curious. I love that. For the highly respected science and space news website, The Debrief. Additionally, Chrissy serves as a partner, writer, and director of PR for The Debrief, and she is also the winner of a Canadian Podcast Award for Best Science Series. Chrissy has appeared on many TV and radio outlets, including the History Channel, E-Talk, HGTV, News Nation, Dash Radio, News Talk 1010, and numerous others. Last year, she was on a show I really enjoyed. She was an on-air co-host of a TV show called Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction, which aired on Discovery Plus and HBO Max. And we'll talk about her show, Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. Chrissy has also appeared in other films and TV shows, including A Tear in the Sky, Ancient Aliens, and Encounter UFO. And with that, if I don't screw this up horribly, I will bring in my little friend, Chrissy. There we go.
Hi.
Hi, I did. I didn't screw it up.
You did a great job.
Chrissy, anytime I do anything technological, I'm like, oh my God, that actually worked.
Fair enough. Sometimes I do that too, to be honest. We live in such a fast technology world right now. It's just, keeping up sometimes is hard.
I grew up with black and white TV, okay?
Fair enough.
I'm 400 times older than you. So anyway, when I was a kid, me and my brother, so we had a big old black and white TV, and it had the clunky, you had to turn the clunk, like the channels by hand. There was no remote controls. And we would fight with each other. Who's going to get up off the couch to turn the click, click, click thing, right? I grew up with rotary phone. When I got a touch-tone phone, Chrissy, when I was 16 in high school, I cried. My parents gave me a touch. That was my birthday. I'm like, you're giving me a touch-tone phone? Like, I cried. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
So, well, everyone has everything now, man. Everything. I didn't have everything. My parents had radio.
Well,
their parents had nothing. Their parents had, I guess, newspapers, right?
Well, you know what? We're not that too far off from each other from the evolution of the television to where it is now. Because when I grew up, like from black and white TVs, and then from radios, right? Just listening to the news and print. And then from black and white TVs, I think was like 60s or 70s. It might have even been
pretty much 60s, yeah. 60s,
yes,
or
and
mid-60s,
so
yeah.
right, and I was born in 84. So we're not that far off actually when it comes to, I didn't get a black and white TV. I was like, the next kind of two editions up, right? I still watched a TV that sat on, was big and massive, and you sat on the floor as a little kid, like as close as you possibly could to the screen watching it, but I sat on the floor and the TV was on the floor. It wasn't a flat screen. There were big box televisions, and we had like satellite. So you'd have like, you'd wait for the dish to come in to like, focus the channel from a blurry channel. So stuff like that. Like I just, so we're not too far off. I just didn't get the black and white aspect of it. But I do love black and white movies and television. I still watch it to this day.
Yeah,
it's some of my favorites.
See, now it's so dramatic to see something on TV black and white. It's like, wow, it's beautiful.
But it's so good.
Black and white cinematographers, those guys were the artists. They were real artists.
I agree with you. Charlie Chaplin and like Alfred Hitchcock, like even just when we look at the Three Stooges, like all of that, I still watch that stuff. Like I will go back and watch The Great Dictator, every X amount of 5 years or so, because I really deeply love it from Charlie Chaplin, his first talkie. So I really, really love old film, and I do like a lot of black and white film. It's some of my favorite. What's the other one? Virginia Woolf, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
That's
like
funny. Yeah.
Brilliant movie. Well, play first, theatrical play, but then amazingly done as a black and white movie. It was,
the lighting directors and the cinematographers in that, and before color, had to. It was art. That was real art, black and white, to make it the depths and the shadows, and black and white conveyed feelings and fright. Alfred Hitchcock, of course, the master. So, I mean, color is probably hard to light too, but I think those were the real artists back in those days. Anyway, did you ever see rabbit ear antennas? Did you you never saw that when you were a kid? Rabbit ears, right? You never saw that.
Oh gosh, yeah, we had rabbit ears. I grew up in rural Ontario, so trying to get, that's why we had a satellite dish. But at one point we had bunny ears too. Even when I went to move to Toronto and there was no streaming services and I didn't have cable, but you could get like regular TV for free. I had bunny ears in my university years, just trying to get television, because I didn't have any money back then when you're a student. So you still want to watch David Letterman, right? Like who doesn't? Or Leno, which I know you worked with. Watch David Leno back and forth, every night, right? For late night television. So yeah, but again, like I agree with you on the black and white. I do deeply love it, and I think that it is such a craft, and it's so unbelievable the some of the works that Hitchcock and other directors did back then. Like it was so good, and I love the storytelling. I wish we told stories like that still.
I agree.
They're some of my favorites.
Last thing on this topic, we had black and white TV my whole entire childhood through high school. I remember I was probably about 8 or 9, and I went to my best friend's house. I'm 8 or 9, and they just got color TV. And the Flintstones came on, Chrissy, right? The Flintstones. And I saw Fred Flintstone in his orange suit. And I said, Fred Flintstone has an orange suit? And I was mesmerized.
Imagine. What color did you think it was?
Well, because it was black and white for me.
In your mind, though. In your mind, did you ever picture it in your mind?
It never, because I wasn't that bright as a child. It never occurred to me that the show, I didn't know what color it was. We didn't have color TV.
But just if you had to picture it in your mind, like, what color it would have been if you.
Never did. It was gray. So I remember the first color TV I ever saw in my life was Fred Flintstone. I'm like, oh my God, it's orange. It was so beautiful. I couldn't believe it. All right. Anyway.
There's the last thing I'll say on this too. We should just do a podcast on this topic because we talk about it forever.
I know.
The same thing with black and white movies with makeup. A lot of the lipsticks that were worn for women were like dark blue. Like it wasn't red. It was like a purple or a dark blue, so that it would show up to look like it was like a very like reddish lip, right? But it was a black lip. And then they would use like purple highlighter, so their face would be contoured in blue or purple lips, and then darkened on the cheeks to show dimension and contrasting. But they were literally wearing clown makeup. So you imagine acting in front of somebody and looking at them, but then when you went in black and white, they looked like this beautiful starlet because with the best contouring, but it really was just like really weird clown makeup if you thought about it in real life.
the first season of Superman in the 50s, the first season of Superman in the George Reeves, was black and white. And his iconic blue Superman costume, it was like light brown. It was
Yeah.
gray brown
Wow.
because it read best. They had to create a whole new suit the next year when they went to color.
So cool.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
cool.
I think we could
Yeah.
probably do an hour.
Oh, we could totally do an hour on Hollywood and yeah.
Forget UFOs. Who cares?
Yeah.
All right, so I always
It's a
ask
Hollywood production podcast.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, let's just do that. So tell me where you grew up and what your parents did and what kind of interest did you have as a child? I always like to ask my guests that question.
That's a great question. No one's actually asked me about where, like, really, what my parents did. But I grew up in just outside of Toronto, Ontario, about an hour away. And then, if anyone knows Kitchener Waterloo, if you know Ontario somewhat, you might know Kitchener has the second largest Oktoberfest in the world outside of Munich in Germany. But it is a German settler town since World War II. But without that, my parents are about 20 minutes outside of that. And I grew up in like rural Ontario. So very countryside, farm, land, cows, chickens, and pigs. Grew up on a dirt road, concession 12. I can say that. I won't say what off major road, but major country road.
Okay.
But yeah, grew up there and didn't live on a farm, but I was surrounded by farms and, would go to the neighbor's farm and play with the chickens as a kid and play with all the stray cats. And
I can't even imagine you're like, do you know the show Beverly Hillbillies? Did you ever see that show?
Oh, I love it.
Remember
yes.
Ellie? You were like Ellie Mae Clampett.
Yeah.
Play with all the animals, remember?
I play with all animals. And funny enough, growing up, I watched Nick at Night as a kid with my dad. So Get Smart, Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction. When Petticoat Junction did a crossover with Green Acres, I lost my mind when they like met up at the train station. And I was like, this is the same community. Very heavily influenced by American television because in rural Canada, you couldn't get cable. It didn't come out far enough. So my parents spent the money that they somewhat had, didn't have a lot growing up, but they got themselves a satellite dish. So I'd watch MTV, Much Music, Disney Channel, and like kids in Canada were not getting that unless you lived in rural Ontario, which is kind of funny, right? It's kind of the HBO. I was locked on HBO majority of my life as a kid, watching some of the best, like 2001 Space Odyssey would come on. And I was like, what is this? Like, and was introduced to so many amazing films and screenplays at such a young age because of, funny enough, living in rural Ontario, right? You would think that most of the time that would be a city kid thing culture, but in Canada during the 80s and the 90s, it was rural Ontario that was getting it. And like you could get a satellite in Kitchener, but you usually got cable because it was cheaper. Did
your friends have satellite dishes as well?
They did, yeah. So if my rural friends did, funny enough, one of my best friends I'm still friends with this day, I've known her since I was 6. We still send each other like Nickelodeon references.
Wow.
Because we would talk about it in school, and most of the other kids would be like, if they just had cable because they were in maybe a smaller town that had access to cable. But in dirt roads, in concessions, you did not have that. So the ones in the school bus, Tamara, Jess, myself, we would talk about Rugrats and Doug and the Disney, the Disney, what's it called? The Mickey Mouse Club. Like we were watching all this stuff. Hey dude, like if anyone's my age would just be screaming because they know these references. So
did you ever see a show called Double Dare? Double Dare?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember that show with the green
Yes,
slime?
I do. You mean the Nickelodeon show?
Okay, so Mark Summers was the host, right? Mark Summers?
I think I remember that. Yeah, I don't know the name, but I know the face.
He's one of my best friends.
Oh, no, shoot.
Mark is one of my best friends.
Really? Tell him a Canadian grew up with him over next time in LA. Bring him out.
I will. But when I'm with him, just a quick story. He's literally one of my best friends. When I'm with him, young people like you, I've been with him, and young women go, Mark Summers? He goes, yeah. Can I have your autograph? And he writes, with love, take the physical challenge, Mark Summers. And I go, Mark, what's this like? He goes, Dan, I'm the Paul McCartney to that age group. He goes, apparently I'm like the Paul McCartney to that age group.
I'm looking now, making sure I remember his face.
Yeah, Mark Summers, Double Dare.
Let me see. Yes.
One of my best friends. In fact, he does the VO when you watch the show, when it debuts, if you watch the intro, from Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers. And now here's your host, Dan Harary. He did the VO. He did the VO for me.
That's so crazy. I'm like, well, see, small world. I
Isn't that
used
great?
to, in a rural Ontario, little girl writing to Nickelodeon to get a room makeover. Funny enough, as an adult, I have done a house makeover. I did achieve that goal with HGTV. They
Ah.
renovated my house, and I did a whole segment on styled.
Hey, I was wondering when I read your bio, HGTV doesn't do UFOs. I didn't think.
No, it doesn't. But I did a reno on my house in Toronto, and I did live up to that childhood moment of wanting a renovation done on television. And it was a blast. But I used to write to Nickelodeon, and I would literally tell my mom, like, I want to go audition at MTV. Like, I remember telling her one day, I was like, can you take me to New York City?
Wow.
But she's like, Chrissy. And I was like obsessed with MTV. I was obsessed with TRL, like Total Request Live and Carson Daly. And there was so much American influence in my life as a kid from film, UFOs, science fiction, technology. Like, it really was wonderful, and it was filled. And it's funny because I was this little girl, living on a dirt road, watching all this, having like really big ideas and like big dreams. And, I feel very lucky I've accomplished some of those things as an adult so far. Yeah.
That's terrific. So you and I are both publicists. How did you get into the dopey PR profession? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, so my background, funny enough, and people might not know, is I have a BA in theater and in comms, but I started in theater. I actually auditioned to get into York University, and I accepted it. And so I went to York for theater. And in my second year, I think I was. This is so funny. I think I was watching Sex in the City,
Okay.
and
Samantha? Yeah, Samantha.
Yeah, and I think this is one of my references, but I was like, what is that? And then also learning more attached to obviously theater. There's communications attached and publicists for theater. And I was just learning more about this. And I said, this is a job. I do this naturally anyway.
Wow.
And in preference to that, I also was really curious because growing up, I would talk a lot about World War II. I was around a lot of World War II stuff with, like my father was interested in it. My father has had a major interest. So I remember learning so much from him and still enjoy it now, but also I'm really interested in propaganda and like what propaganda meant and how it influenced people and how the spoken word is so powerful. So I started reading stuff about Edward Bernays, the godfather of PR, and doing his Lucky Strike cigarettes campaigns and using the women's liberation movement
I
to push.
never heard of him.
Yeah, in the 1932, I believe, or it might have been
Yeah,
19.
he's the godfather of PR, really?
He's the father. Yeah, but he was the grandson of Freudian. And so, yeah, there's so many things that happened, and all of it kind of came to a point where I was like, wow, this is a job. Like, I do this naturally and I'm so interested in it. So I finished my theater degree and then directly went into another degree of comms. And I was picking up comms classes when I was in university anyway, because I was doing a general BA liberal arts degree.
Right.
So I was learning about media communications because I was interested in it. And then I really started narrowing in public relations and then stopped thinking about doing theater and other elements of that and moved into PR and just deeply loved it, was deeply obsessed with it, and just started researching everything and doing it myself and finding like projects to work on and building my career by just doing. And then I went and finished while I was doing my postgrad. And in my postgrad, I built my logo for Vocab Communications on my May 2-4 break, like March break. Instead of people taking a break, I went back to the computer in the school lab with my friend and we built my company logo. And from that day forward,
you're in your early
I was
20s.
25.
25, okay. And
I was
please
25.
tell me, does vocab stand for vocabulary? I mean, what is vocab?
Well, it can. It actually stands for Voice of Canadian American Brands, but it really is just short for vocabulary. And like vocabulary is another word for lexicons. We always have to use different lexicons in our job, right? And learn different industries and understand different lexicons. So I built that, and then I started freelancing, and it just people loved my work. I really deeply understood media relations, and that's what I do now, and still do. And now obviously work in the journalism space as well, and have moved there. But Yeah, and was fascinated by it. So my love of like media as a kid, talking about, watching TV, and my love for the arts and my love for culture, and all those things was just that wonderful melting place for me to create an agency and be able to hire people that worked with me at an office downtown Toronto for a while. I got rid of it during COVID, but for 17 years I've been in public relations, which seems a lot for me. It's I'm 41.
Right. Oh,
So
I
I've had
remember. I was at your 40th birthday party. Yeah, right.
Right,
I remember.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like I've had like at least 20 years of work experience, and then previously before that I worked at Molson Canada as a summer sales rep and a promo girl, funny enough. And so that's what got me into marketing and sales. And then while I was doing that on my summer breaks, while I was like working at Molson Canada running promotions. So I did a lot in my early 20s really quickly with education and working with corporate companies in sales and marketing, and then moved into PR, started my agency at 25. And now, about 5 years ago, about 6 years ago, I started podcasting. And then about 4 years ago, I really released my podcast, Rebelliously Curious. And now are doing the other side of it, is doing more journalism. And again, loving it, and now doing more television, right? That I wanted to do as a kid. So things come full circle. You just never stop, right? You got a
That's
whole
great.
full life.
I have to tell you a funny story.
Go for it.
Sorry. This always happens to me on Monday mornings. I went to Boston University, which has a world famous school of communications, and I studied communications. Because I had a calling similar to you. I had a calling for media, and I was there for years, obviously. So I studied advertising, marketing, journalism, TV production, and filmmaking. Right?
Wow.
Chrissy, everything but public relations. Everything but. And I remember my junior year, a friend of mine came up and said, "Dan, you're how come you're not taking public relation classes?" And I said, I wish I knew exactly what I said. I said something like, "PR, I'm never going to do that. That's horrible. I'm not going to do PR. I've been a publicist for 41 years now." Right? The one thing I did not study at college was PR. I've been a publicist my whole entire life. So you never know how it's going to turn out.
You don't, you honestly tell, I've never told this story on the mic before, I think, and thank you for asking about my childhood, because not many people ask that. They do, but they're just not, you don't get so deep into it. But it also is extremely important I think, from a psyche perspective of like what
Right.
kids love and what they want to do and where you end up in your life. And you really do know, you can find out at a very young age of what you're meant to do and what your passion is. So this is funny. It was the most wildest story. And I'll always remember it. And I remember telling it once at the University of Toronto when I was speaking there on a panel with a whole bunch of PR students. And I said, when I was 25 years old, I said I worked, or I might have even been a little bit younger than that, actually. I was probably like 23, 24. I worked with Molson Canada, and I had a summer sales rep job. I think I was 23. Actually, I might even been 22. I was pretty young. But in the summer, I'd worked for them. So I had a company vehicle that was branded that said Molson Canada on it, or Coors
You
Light,
were a
right?
Molson
But
girl, yeah.
I was a Molson girl, but I was also a summer sales rep. So I had a whole bunch of I had like all of the East District of Toronto, where I live now. Funny. I represented all of that with my two other bosses. So I was supporting my two other female bosses, and I was the female younger support lead for them. And so I would go to account, and, talk to them, do audits on stuff. I'd run promotions there for Coors Light or Corona, and then we'd like sell out the bar because I was previously a promo girl. So I know how to run promos, and I also worked my own promos, which I didn't get paid extra for. And we could talk about that another day, but, talk about women pay gaps. But anyway, but I did it. And the funniest thing is that when I was driving that car one day to go to a lockup on the East End for my boss on the Danforth, I was going down Spadina, if anyone knows Toronto, and I was going to take a left to go on the highway, which is the DVP, or the Gardiner, sorry. And so at that light underneath the bridge on Spadina, I'm at the stoplight, and I always have like fruit and stuff with me, because when you're a sales rep, you're running around, right? And you just have food with you. So this homeless man comes to my window, and I roll down the window and I give him like some fruit and apples. And he looks at me, and like, remember, I'm driving a deckled Molson vehicle. Like I look like I work for Molson Canada. he looks at me, and the only thing he says to me is, after I gave him the fruit, he looked at me and said, "You should be in public relations."
You told me that story, and I forgot. That's a wonderful
Yeah.
story.
And I forgot I told you that. And I went, "Oh my God." And I then remember like, like slowly roll up the window, right? Where I'm like, did that, like,
Like
how does
from a
he know I just
from
applied for my post grad? I was like,
from a
I
home.
just
This is from a homeless man.
This is from
A
a
homeless.
homeless man that does not know who I am. And it's the only thing he says to me. And I'm looking out, and then the light turns green and I'm driving away to go on the gardener. And I'm like, how does he know I just applied for my post grad and I haven't got accepted yet? And like, I hope I get the job, like, I hope that I'll be able to go learn more about public relations. Like, I just finished my BA, but now I'm doing my post grad. And I couldn't believe it. And to this day, like, like, you can say it's a coincidence, but
No.
public relations has led me to UFOs, and it led me to TV.
I have a whole book called My Paranormal Life, but I've had moments similar that were so incredibly obvious. Dan, go here, take this path now. And every single time it was to my advantage. And this goes back to the age of 5. I've had those my whole life. But that was a sign from the universe for you.
I do truly believe
homeless
that.
man to tell you that, of all the things a homeless man would say.
But it's funny, I've had 2 other strangers recently since I've transitioned into television. I've had a stranger on the street come up to me and ask me if I don't want to say it specifically because I'm working on it, but working on a project, and they said it's going to happen. And I was like, how the hell would you know that?
Wow.
So, and then some other woman at Seoul, I ended up seeing her ask a question, and I was like, wow, like that was a really, really thoughtful question. And then I walked out of Seoul and into the lobby. We're all gathering for a break. And she comes up to me and she's like, "You're on a TV show, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "You have a podcast?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she's like, "Yeah." And then we just started chatting, and she's lovely. And I have her contact now. But then when we walked back into the theater, she's like, "Are you working on this project?" And I said, "Yeah." I'm like, "How did you know that?" And then she looked at me and she goes, "Sometimes I just know." And she's like, "And I'm generally never," and she goes, "And I'm never wrong." And then she like walked away. And I was like, why do people randomly in their lives love to come up to me, strangers I don't know, and tell me things about my life? I love it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would never stop it.
I think what it means is that you're on the right path. You're going in the right direction. And every so often the universe is telling you, yeah, you're going in the right direction.
Keep going. And I think that, people could be like, oh, it's in the woo, but no, like I truly believe that too. And I feel so very fortunate, and also feel lucky that I'm able, like yourself, like I pick up on the cues and I just go with them, because it also makes life interesting.
Okay, so now we have to jump over to the UFO stuff. Did you ever have a UFO encounter, experience a sighting as a child or a young person, or ever? Because I never asked you that question.
Yeah, I've had an experience. I've had a couple like unidentified flying objects, like not couple, but once specifically with a boyfriend when I was it was like a backyard UFO. But it might have been atmospheric as well. And there was a plane that flew towards it. So we knew that it was spotted, but it looked atmospheric, and it was something I've never seen before. Pretty much it was just like it had a small smoke trail, but it was moving so small, but it had a big fireball at the end of it.
Huh.
It was wild, and I didn't have my phone with me, but I remember looking up, and then I was like, "What is that?" And I said out loud, and I was like, "Look." And they just my ex was like, "What the hell?" So I've had that. I've had like a ghost phenomena happen at my parents' place that myself and my dad ended up kind of seeing the tail end of it, and my cousin's uncle as well in the house. So I've had some for sure paranormal things that have happened, but I think a lot of people they just don't realize it sometimes, or they just kind of brush it off. But for sure there's been a high phenomena around me, and my father, if you want to say this is generational, but
Right.
my father had a UFO experience when he was 18, and that's really what brought me to the UFO topic, was seeing a photo that he gave me of what he took and what he saw with a group of people.
He took a photo of it. Wow.
Yeah, he has it. He has the little the negative, which I'm really great. He still has the negative of it. Yeah. So I've been meaning for him to, like, I've been saying, you got to open the safe in the family house so that you can give me the negative so I can blow it up. So he's got to my dad has a time capsule of an office, because people are like, where is it? And I was like, it's somewhere in the time capsule of an office. But telling like almost a 70-year-old man to go through his entire time capsule of an office is almost impossible.
Well, I'll be 69 in June, so I could probably be your father. Anyway, that's a separate thing.
Well, he has all this stuff.
If you print that photo, you got to send it to me so I can put it on the Wow signal, because I just created a regular column there called UAP Photo of the Week. So I would put that up. I'll put that up.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've been asking him. I think this summer he's going to go look for me, and then when I get the negative, I'm going to blow it up and put it as an art piece in my living room. Actually,
so he saw it probably in the 70s.
Between 79 and 78. He's not 100% of the year, but so the story is he was just outside of Pembroke, Ontario, in that region, which is like northern Ontario, and he was driving up to a cottage with a group of friends, and he saw a UFO in the distance, and they saw it. They were kind of like chasing it. And then when they drove up to it, it was hovering, but it was hovering above a telephone pole, like a telephone light. So, on like the highways, how big they were much smaller compared to what they're on highways now. And this is like a side highway, right, in rural Ontario. And everyone gets out of the car, and they're all up, like looking at this thing, right. And it's hovering. And it's like the size, my dad said, like little children could fit into it. It's not very big, and it's a saucer shape. And he said it was a metallic. And so what ended up happening is they took a photo of it, right? Which is amazing. And you can see the taillights of the cars driving by where this thing is like hovering. And so they took a photo of it, and then but what it looks like is because it's film, it looks like a flash of light. Like it looks like a big gleam of light around it, because
was it
film.
daytime or nighttime?
I forget that I think it was more day. I have to look at it again, but it might have been like I think it was probably like maybe evening to a degree.
Was it one of those little Instamatic Kodak cameras that I had?
I'd actually asked. 13? I didn't. Good question. I never asked him what he actually took it on. I probably should. I should. Yeah. But it wasn't. I don't think it was a disposable. I think it was an actual film camera. But I will ask. And so he took that, and it was probably disposable. Sorry, it wasn't disposable because he has a negative of it. So it was a film camera. The question of what type of camera, and there wasn't so many different types back then, right? There was just only a few, but they take a picture. But really what's more interesting is my dad flashed its high beams at it, and it flashed back at him.
Wow, that's the best part of the story.
Right. And then what ended up happening, and got even more wild, is that they had a rifle in the back of the car that had a scope on it. So they took the rifle out and they pointed it at the UFO, not to shoot it, but to look at it through the scope. Right. Yeah. And it instantly accelerated and took off. So they watched it instantly accelerate. They, were close enough to see, like my dad said, it was like a metallic like color. It was very, very tiny, like little kids would fit in it. It was very small. And then watch it move. So at that point, it's funny enough, my dad calls me one night, like freaking out. And he's like, Chrissy, have you watched like the new George Knapp documentary?
Oh yeah, that was.
And good. I said, yeah, I've seen some, like, I think I've seen a little bit of it, but he's like, have you seen the episode where, the ranch farmer takes out a gun that has a scope on it to look at it, and the UFO does the same thing? Dad freaks out, and he's like, that's what happened to me. He's like, that's what happened to all of us. And he's been telling me that story for years, right? So he's like, it happened to somebody else too, the exact way it happened to him.
It's like, don't shoot me, I'm friendly, don't shoot me.
That's exactly what it is. Or it's just like feels that it knew that there is some type of threat, right? So yeah, it's a wild story, but it's so funny. It just came back this year, and my dad's been telling me that my whole life.
Okay, we're going to take a little break right now. We need to hear from a very handsome fellow who's going to be talking about his book called After They Came, and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm Dan Harary, author of the sci-fi novel After They Came. After They Came tells the story of Jonathan Tuckerman, a Los Angeles man down on his luck and truly alone in life, who decides to mark his 70th birthday by drowning himself in the Pacific Ocean. Instead, he inadvertently becomes the world's Wonder Man after a pair of extraterrestrial visitors from the Pleiades appear in a giant spacecraft, pluck him from the sea, and present him to the media and the world as their ambassador to mankind. Many leading UFO researchers have embraced After They Came. Nick Pope has called the novel, quote, a delightful tale of wonder and hope. Richard Dolan adds, quote, this book is a captivating novel of benevolent alien contact. And famous alien abductee Travis Walton has said, quote, After They Came is presented in such a graphic visual style, it could serve as the basis for an entertaining film adaptation. After They Came is now available on paperback right here at Genius Book Publishing. And we're back. By the way, my book After They Came is now also available as an audiobook. It just was released as an audiobook. After They Came, print, ebook, audiobook, all available on Amazon.com. Thank you. Grew up with a dad who was a UFO experiencer, and you heard the story. So, yeah, a lot of people I know are intergenerational with the interest. That's interesting. That's interesting. All right. How did the Debrief come about? You're one of the owners of the Debrief. Was that formed? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I don't know the genesis of how Micah and Tim McMillan and MJ met, but they, are obviously friends online to some degree. I don't know how it started because everybody lives in different regions. MJ's Canadian, Tim lives in Germany, and MJ and Micah lives in North Carolina, as most people know. So the Debrief launches, and I'm obviously following the UFO topic, and this whole article breaks, and I'm like, who's this Debrief? I was like, I've never heard of this outlet. Like, who are these guys? So I do my own, PR, track a journalist, espionage. And so I end up adding all of them to Facebook, right? And then I'm like deep diving on all these guys.
I've been doing that for 41 years. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So I was like, I'm going to track a journalist. That's what I know how to do. So I look and I'm like, who are these guys that are writing independently? They're writing for this Debrief. I'm like, what is this media outlet? Like, I've never heard of it. Is this new? So I see Ryan Sprague is a friend of mine that ends up writing. And I was like, who are these guys? And so he's like, it's a new outlet. They're a group of friends. And I said, can you introduce me to them? And so he said, yeah, for sure I will. So what ended up happening was MJ Benias he agreed to be a friend on Facebook with me. And I saw that he posted something about looking for writers. And I went, oh, okay. So I contacted him and say, hey, I have an interest in UFOs and I have an interest in science and technology. And I would love to work with you on a video side perspective because I see you have a YouTube channel. And MJ's like, yeah, sure. Send us a news test and let's just see how that goes. So I created these new little news reels and videos for the Debrief on the YouTube channel and just started covering little news stories with all of them. And then what ended up happening is I was part of a Discord group with everybody that were writers and people they started working on the team initially. And Tim and them just said, I gave some PR advice in it. I think funny enough, Rogan, which is has shown a lot of our stuff now, even still now, Joe Rogan on the Debrief. And I've been fortunate to meet him and get to know him a little bit better in this past year. But before that, Rogan wrote something or said something on the podcast that our article was not accurate, and that wasn't true. And so we ended up tweeting it out, and it got a whole bunch of play. And they were like, that was some great advice. So they asked me to start doing the comms for the Debrief, and I did. And then with that said, I became a partner in the company and to this day still. So then I launched my own podcast and
hold on. So for Debrief, what year did you?
Oh gosh, that was about 5 years ago now.
Immerse yourself in there. 5 years. So
5 years we've all been together.
2020.
Yeah. So the Debrief launched in, I believe, November of that year. It's been 5 years for that November. And then I came on the team in January along with Christopher Plain. So it was 2 or 3 months after the Debrief launch that we became part of it.
Almost one of the founders in a way.
Almost, yeah. Almost. I'm the founders are the three of them. Chris and I are partners along with Steve McDaniel, who's also a partner as well, that came on just that launch day. I believe he came on to help them because there was so much traffic going to the website.
So at this point, you're running your PR firm, and you are a contributing source of news, information, and videos to the Debrief, right? Both of those things. Then, when did you launch your podcast?
I'd have to double check when the first date of my podcast really launched. It's been about 4 years, I believe now. Yeah.
Okay. and it airs on the Debrief YouTube channel.
It does, yeah.
All right, and Rebelliously Curious is that's a great title. Who have been some of your favorite guests? And you haven't had me yet, and you need to have me on. But who have been some of your favorite? Who are some of your favorite guests over the years? Would you say?
Oh gosh, I've done a series right now with theologians that's been really interesting around science and how science is changing in the evolution of science and theology. And I really like Reverend David Wilkinson, Ted Peters. Like it's been really interesting learning and speaking to some of these most, like Ted Peters is like from astrophysics, and same with Reverend David Wilkinson, are like unbelievable in the work that they're committing to science and theology. Like Ted Peters like pretty much wrote, along with a group of people, the recommendations for the Vatican of how to look at science. Like he's such a trailblazer. So those conversations are really interesting. But I would say even like I've interviewed Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal, Randall Nickerson. I think I've interviewed almost everybody, minus David Grush and Jake Barber at this point, and one day they will be. Richard Doty was my most recent interview that I was the most excited to, because I'm, not excited to maybe to speak with him, but deeply love that topic that ended up happening in the 80s with him working on a disinformation campaign related to the American government. So I've had so many guests, it's so hard to nail down, but those conversations in recent from the Reverends have been really wonderful, but also just all the UFO people that have committed politically and also through science and through history, have just been so wonderfully informative.
Did you ever interview Eric von Daniken?
Not yet, no.
Wouldn't that be a good one?
For sure. A lot of the stuff that I do focus on too is a lot of science, like edge science and tech, or a little bit of politics that's mixed in with UAP as well. One of the biggest ones that I think happened is Danny Sheehan. That was a very well watched podcast because I had Danny Sheehan break down the first legislation of UAP, the Whistleblower Act, and we really dived into the nitty gritties, and then we looked at like the inconsistencies. And at that point, that podcast became a big thing because he actually accidentally said Grush's name in it. He said his last name, and people before
Grush came out.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
A lot of people were like, "Oh my gosh!" So then it was like literally like a month after the story came out. So unfortunately, I know I didn't mean to leak anything, but I ended up getting people a sneak peek of that name because of Danny made an accident, and it wasn't very wasn't intentional in any way. It was just through a conversation. But I feel like I've met so many wonderful people and have had such wonderful conversations with them, and I hope I keep getting to do that.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's good. Good for you. When we're offline, I have a couple of clients, brand new PR clients that I think might be of interest to you to interview.
Okay, nice.
I'll send that to you. All right. So your show, Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. I call you were the bad cop on that show. Mitch Horowitz was the good cop. You were the bad cop. And the premise was people came in with their stories, their encounters, their experiences. Some had evidence, some did not. And they're telling you and Mitch in a bar in Roswell, right? In a bar about their stuff. And then Mitch is like analyzing it from his heart really, and his emotions. And then they go to you and you're like, well, there was a satellite that night at 6.2 longitude and this metal was from your tooth and this is part of a tooth. And I thought it was just such a wonderful dynamic with that show. I enjoyed that. But tell me about that show, and maybe tell me some stories that viewers didn't see from that show.
Yeah, well, I think the viewers actually saw most of them. There was one story between, they showed a little clip of it, but they didn't show the extended version. But I think they were lying to us. That's why we didn't cut it in, just for credibility's sake. But it was two friends that said they saw a UFO in a field and they ran up to it, but their story wasn't consistent. And so she was really just trying to sell I believe a new video game that her and her boyfriend were producing.
Oh, wow.
So we obviously I think they clipped them in for like a second, right? Of like, these are a whole bunch of other people that we've spoken to, but didn't really get to their story. So a lot of the stories that you don't see are ones that they didn't feel were credible, or felt that the experiencer probably was lying. So yeah, but there was this dynamic of good cop and bad cop. Like for sure, I'm a journalist in that way, so I'm going to ask hard questions and do those things, and I have to follow logic. That's and evidence.
That was
That's
the
what
best. No, that
journalism
was the
do.
best part of the show when you're
Yeah,
telling them the
everyone was like, I
science,
was like the
because
the Simon Cowell of
yeah,
UFOs, you
because their
know.
faces are like, oh no, she's going to tell me I saw a frisbee. Oh no,
I know.
that's what
Yeah, it
happened.
was a
Yeah.
weather balloon. Yeah, actually. But
Swamp
no,
gas and a flight
yeah, it
flock
was
of
swamp
geese.
gas.
Yeah,
Right, it's the Chinese weather balloon this time. But I or the Chinese spy balloon. But
right.
yeah, I am not that type of person in real life where I'm like, I'm gonna break you some bad news. But I do like the fact that I don't like the fact that I was so clinical on it, because really in real life I'm not that clinical at all. Like we'll talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the Muppets or
I
things
know
on
you
my
fairly
socials.
well. Yeah, you were very academic, I'd say, on that show.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with coming off to being a little bit, for sure, more academic and clinical, but and I don't want to say heartless because that's unfortunate, but there wasn't as much of my personality as there usually is.
I agree with
But
you. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
but with
Yeah,
that said, I do respect the fact that it came off as more scientific on my end, because that's what I do in journalism, is I write about science and technology, and I write about news. And those are things that I feel are, my job is to show the facts and talk about the facts, right? And re-report if the facts are wrong. So that does really stay on brand of who I am, in context of like the way that it was done. And I tried not to lead so much with just like a UFO believer, but by, hey, this is the evidence. And it really was wonderful to work with a group of people that were doing the research, because I don't do it myself, right? It was a group of us doing it, and then analyzing it. But it was wonderful to work with them and really discuss and look into, how to identify a UFO, because that stuff is very important for us to know. And then being able to know that we have all these data banks and radar and satellite imagery that we can pull from to be able to say, no, not really. It was the ISS, and it's not
yeah,
to make people feel stupid. It's
right.
to help educate them, to be like, hey, it's so common for people to make mistakes, especially pilots that think Starlink is a UFO. It's okay for you to think that too, because it's so common, unfortunately.
I'm
Yeah.
friends with David Altman. He was one of the producers, wasn't he?
He was. I love David. He's such a great guy.
He's a
Yeah.
friend of mine. Yeah,
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 he's such a great guy. And and David really does deeply love this topic too, and I respect that from him, because he is trying to do his best as a producer to put that truth forward. Um and so he's been doing this for a long time. Yeah.
I know. I thought your role on that show was very clever. That they would have you there, and your personality was a little subdued
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And
They
and and some people looked at you and they're like, oh, they got up in that like they were going to kill themselves and cry because they didn't see a UFO.
I
So
know.
I felt bad for you. Like I'm like, because you're my friend, I'm like, oh no, they're gonna throw beer in her face after the cameras turn off or something.
Well, I did say that to producers. I was like, they're like, I said, how are you going to protect me? And they're like, no one's going to freak out. And I said, you don't know the UFO community, do
Yeah.
you?
Did they walk you to
I
your
was like,
car? I hope they walked you to your car afterward.
yeah. And to be honest, every guest that showed up was generally, except for one experience was a little bit more challenging, but most people were pretty good, like pretty good about the information. It's really hard. I'm not that type of person. I don't want
No, I know.
anyone to feel bad or mess with
And
their reality. So usually what you didn't see after is I tried to talk to them a lot and just explain to them like, hey, like if you don't feel that this is my perception of, this doesn't always have to be what your reality is, right? These are things that I found and these are facts, but I don't want to negate people's experiences because they're meaningful to them. The most interesting part about this was the psychology about if who would want to see a UFO and if you didn't, and you really didn't know if they're going to walk in the room, if they were excited to know or if they were petrified. So that was, I think that to me, I would do a show just on the psychology of that outside of just the data. It was more
right,
interesting about how people reacted to the information they were given, because if they wanted to see it, how bad they wanted to believe and how bad they wanted to see something of the unknown. And then another person will come in and you wouldn't be able to guess if they were that person, and they'd be like, no, I'm scared. I hope it's not a UFO because I don't want to mess with my perception of reality. So that's really the fascinating aspect of the show outside the data.
It was a very interesting premise for the show. I'd never
Yeah,
seen
it had
anything like it. I have to ask you, is there another season coming?
not that I know of right now. I think we're only doing the one season, but that could change. You never know. They might give me a call, in the next like June or July, and we start filming. So
You'll let me.
right
You'll let
now, I
me.
haven't heard anything.
You'll
Yeah.
let me know. I'll get my
Oh,
popcorn. Get my popcorn ready. All right. You were in an
for sure.
episode of Ancient Aliens.
Mhm.
What episode was that? What was your theme? What was your theme?
Yeah, I had a couple episodes. One episode I spoke to about SETI, made some references about SETI and the work they're doing, and I really do love SETI. SETI actually recently shared some of my interviews I've done with Seth Shosak on my Instagram, and they've shared that, which is really nice of them. But SETI, and then along with Jacques Vallée, I feel so honored that in the tribute to Jacques Vallée that they put me in that. Um, and I said to Jacques, he's like, thank you for saying such kind words, Chrissy. And I said, it's true, everything about you. And I just feel so honored to be able to be in that, commemorative moment in the History Channel about you, a whole episode dedicated to you. And they put me in, I have a relationship with Jacques. I've worked with him in PR, and we are friends. And I
That's
feel
right.
very fortunate. I get to talk to the godfather of UFOs.
Yeah. Other than
I think
Dr. Hynek, who passed away, Jacques is probably the next one down, right?
he is, yeah. And he's just such a wonderful, wonderful human. Like, and I'll just say this because I work with him and stuff. It's like, no, like he is one of the best people I have for sure have ever met with, and have talked to. He deeply cares about people. He deeply cares about this topic, and he knows so much, and he keeps going, and it's beautiful. And he's just such a smart man. And I just feel very lucky that I've gotten to know him. Yeah.
That's cool. I'd love to meet him. I'm reading his book right now. He wrote a book with Paolo Harris called Trinity. You know
Yes,
that
I
one?
did the PR for Trinity,
You did?
actually.
So you know
Yes, I
about
did.
a UFO that crashed a month after the Trinity test in
Correct.
1945. So
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
by
we did
co
the
go ahead.
PR that I did for him was really wonderful. We got picked up in the New York Times did a piece on it. The Daily Mail did a piece, but then the New York Times, when it picked up, it went syndicated to the Seattle Times, and then everyone started talking about it. But then it also went to when oh my gosh, Tucker Carlson, when he was on Fox News, Tucker Carlson did a whole piece of it in one of his episodes.
Wow.
If you like him or not, but it for a good week or so, it was the buzz of town within media, in mainstream and even tabloid media. I still consider the Daily Mail a tabloid, but some people might not, but I do.
I've
And
been
yeah,
in
and
the
I
I
felt,
was in the Daily Mail. They did a profile of me once about my
did
UFO
they?
stories.
Well, and I feel I just feel very lucky. And actually, I think I was been in the Daily Mail too. I forgot about that. They did a piece on the TV show. I totally forgot. But yeah, I feel very lucky that that like happened, because it was so interesting, because it was really about legislation. We had to wait for a while for that part to get picked up, but it made sense because legislation was looking not just at Roswell. They decided to go back to Trinity as well, and that was a huge part of it. And Jack does play a big part in that.
I only just recently heard from a friend about the Trinity UFO crash. Now, by coincidence, in 1997, I had a visual effects client who made a documentary film called Trinity and Beyond: The Atomic Bomb Movie,
Oh,
and that I got that in the New York Times, and I'm actually a credit at the end of the movie. I think he spelled my name right for Peter. But it's the history of the U.S. atomic weapons program, and he restored all the old government military footage. All the color had been dissolving and dissipating. My clients made a deal. He went to the government. He said, look, I have a process to restore old color film, and I love atomic bombs. If I restore your film for you guys, can I use some of it for my documentary? They made a deal. So
wow.
if you ever see Trinity and Beyond: The Atomic Bomb Movie, and other Hollywood films, TV shows, and films since that came out, they always license his footage because he restored Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Trinity, all those. He restored the color film for all that. So anyway, I had never heard of the Trinity UFO crash, but I know all about the Trinity UFO bomb test. because of my
That's
kind.
amazing. I'd actually love to watch that. I really like stuff on the Manhattan Project and
Yeah, you'd love
anything.
this. Trinity and
I
Beyond, the atomic bomb movie. Trinity and Beyond, the atomic
Yeah, I
bomb movie.
think I've heard of it too, and I'll watch it. But I get obsessed sometimes with topics like war topics and
Me
stuff like
too. Me
World
too. I've
War
been
One and
watching
World War
Nazis. I've
Two.
been watching a lot of Nazis lately. I have no idea why.
Me too. I got
Yeah.
stuck for like watching stuff on World War Two for like, I don't know, a good like 6 months. And then I'd be like, I was talking to my dad, I'm like, watch this documentary, watch this documentary. And was watching so much and just reading so much about it. But then I get really, yeah, I get hyper fixated on that. And then I want to learn so much more. But the same thing, but it's all interconnected, like the nuclear, UFOs, like national security, World War II. Like I remember there's times that I bring up World War II nuggets, like of history, and people sometimes look at me. I was at a party once, at a Christmas party. And this one guy and I started talking about the politics of World War II. And we're like, if certain things didn't happen, like Hitler would have been able, if Hitler did not lean into the USSR,
Oh,
into
I know.
Stalin,
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
probably all be speaking German,
I was just going
you
to say
know?
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
right. And we were laughing because he looked at me and he was just like, what? Like, how do you know all these things? Because I think in his perception of that, me maybe being a younger woman, younger than him, that I wouldn't be able to keep up with the geopolitical or even just a historical conversation. But he looked at me and he's just like, it was kind of rude, to be honest. He looked at me. He's like, "They're smarter than they say you are." And I just looked at him, and I know where he's getting from. So it's a passive aggressive microaggression comment to be a compliment. I took it for what it is. It's of the age of the time. But I said to him, I'm like, yeah, but I think he was very surprised. But I said, no. He's like, you know so much about World War II, and I said, well, yeah, because of my father. I said,
Right.
but also I really actually like it a lot, and I love history.
Me
So I
too.
like anything history related. I also love anything when it comes to aerodynamics, like looking at older planes. I went to like the Ontario Aviation and Space Museum recently in Ottawa and like lost my mind
Oh,
looking
wow.
at like World War II planes from the Lancaster bomber. Like people must have been like, and I did a whole Instagram recap on it too and brought my best friend because she likes this stuff too. So we thought we were like, I could have spent my entire day there. Like it was unbelievable.
Are you
And
friendly with Jesse Marcel III?
friendly, you mean
I
by?
mean,
Do you
have you
mean
interviewed him?
history?
Because he's all about, he's invent all kinds of aviation stuff he invents.
No, I'm like, oh, I thought you meant Jesse Michaels for a second.
Jesse Marcel III. He has an
No.
aviation. He has an aviation design company. I'll hook you up with him. Jesse Marcel
Yeah.
III, the grandson of Jesse Marcel.
I was just gonna say, I was like, when
Yes.
you were saying Jesse Marcel, I was
Jesse
like, the
Marcel
man has
III.
passed.
Yeah,
but...
I interviewed him. I interviewed him a few months ago. Super great guy, incredibly interesting. His grandfather took him fishing once, and he's a kid. And the grandfather said, "Yeah, those were aliens that we." And I told him, "Yeah, we covered aliens."
See, I love it because I love like the aviation aspect. Like I remember finding out there was not the stealth bomber before that. I think it was the first stealth plane. Oh my gosh, what's it called? It was the early 50s. Oh my gosh, which one is it? But anyway, knowing like just a small fact, I forget what plane it is now, but knowing that like there was no computers back then. So like the way the measurements were made out for this plane was on a slide ruler. Like, and then when they put it into the computer, they were like, this thing will never fly. So you imagine like building planes without computers and doing it with a slide ruler and be like, all right,
my father invented drones. Literally, my father invented drones
oh, right, I forgot you told
for
me
the
that.
army. For the army, I have proof of this. I have proof. And my father had a slide rule. He was a nerd, like from Big Bang Theory, and he had a slide rule in his pocket his whole life. With
It's
his little
amazing.
pens in his pocket protected. Before we run out of time, you and I could definitely do part 2. But do you believe in extraterrestrial life? / how when you have conversations with people who don't believe, like for me, when I tell my mother goes, "Danny, it's enough already. There's no aliens. There's no aliens. It's enough already." That's my mother. And we all know that there are because I've seen incredible things. So do you believe? And then how do you deal with non-believers in conversation?
Great question. I believe, I don't know if they're from off planet. I follow more of the interdimensional theory.
Right.
I will lean towards Jacques Vallée, and even before Jacques, it's always kind of working with him has always been more of a theory I feel more comfortable with. I also like them if they're here, extraterrestrial, if they're actually on the planet and it's been here forever. I think that to me seems plausible, very plausible, actually.
Logical. Yeah.
It seems logical to me. Them coming from another planet, we know that our science, there's nothing that we have that says that could possibly happen on Earth that we know of as humans, but we know what we don't know.
Right.
But warp drive technology is becoming a real thing, and they're working on it. So, if we crack that code, then we'll be able to travel throughout the cosmos with our eyes closed, pretty much as, snap of a finger. So I think that that might be possible at the time. Right now, I'll stick towards those theories, but I do believe that there is something going on and there's something out there. I would never be doing my podcast if I didn't think that UFOs or even extraterrestrial or something is happening to a very high level to people around the world, and maybe off planet too. It's happening to them, right? We can't just imagine it would be us. If
Right.
there's obviously other people, other life out there, and other intelligent life, that they might be having the same experiences. But I think something's going on. I just don't know if we are at the point with science to really understand what it is.
How do you deal with people who look at you and go, Chrissy, there's no aliens. It's enough already with the.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you have those conversations?
Yeah, with people that have that, I've talked to a few people that don't believe it. They're allowed to believe what they want,
Right.
but I always say to them, be open-minded to new
Right.
data and new opinions, because
Right.
here's the thing, something we can think is a UFO and then we find out that it wasn't. I'm like, okay, like I'm not saddened by it. I'm not like, oh no, like,
Right.
we didn't, that one isn't. Like, I'm just like, okay, that makes sense. We figured it out. Let's move on to the next, right?
Right.
Like, we've
Right.
done a great job. We know what it is. If it's accurate, then yeah, let's move on. So for me, I just try to tell skeptics, you're important to be there, first of all, because you do ask better questions sometimes than we do, rather than just believing in that word, and just actually being open-minded to ask harder questions and to push us to think harder. So I appreciate skeptics for that, or I should say people that are debunking for that, not overly skeptical, but they do help us. We have to work together in that space. But I do ask them to be open-minded. If they're a closed-minded skeptic, then there's no point of me working with them, because
Right.
they're not open-minded to new data. We both need to be open-minded to new data and to change our opinions, because what do they say about people and their mental health? The show to see if somebody has good mental health or good abilities to understand logic in that is to see their flexibility in what they know about themselves and what they think about the world and their perception. So it's important to be flexible minded in your work, but also just in your mental health.
I have a doctor I see twice a year for checkups. He's a brilliant genius guy, brilliant genius. And every time I go see him, I bring a UFO book that I'm reading. And he looks at me and he goes, Dan, again with the UFOs? And he shakes his head. He looks exactly like Eugene Levy, by the way. He literally could be Eugene Levy's twin brother. So I always look
It's
at him and
amazing.
laugh. But genius guy. I go, and he always sees my UFO books, and he always makes a face, Chrissy, right? I go, Dr. Saul, with all due respect, I said, I know as much about medicine as you know about UFOs. I said, what I know would blow your mind. And what I know nothing about medicine, I said, please don't judge what you don't know. And he kind of looked at me like, oh, maybe Dan has a point.
Yeah,
Because he
you
always says,
need to
Dan,
do.
where are they? I don't see UFOs. How come they don't drag them out? When are they just going to show them to us? I don't understand.
Well, maybe the one reason why UFOs are here now in this time is that we all have to understand how to be flexible and work together and understand different opinions and different points of view. Because maybe one day when we figure out how to work together, maybe then they'll show themselves of what they actually are. There's something towards that. Like, we keep fighting each other rather than just working together and being open-minded.
Right.
It's like maybe the outcome will change for us. Who knows? Maybe our consciousness will change, and that will change as well.
I think perhaps, and we'll wrap up on this, I think perhaps the reason that disclosure has not happened, and this is a really great theory, is that the extraterrestrials themselves have told whoever the new Majestic 12 people are, or whoever the black budget people are, don't reveal us yet. We're not ready. We'll let you know, right? The ETs, we'll let you know when we're ready. We don't think mankind's ready. And if you blow it before we're ready, we're not going to be happy. So, like, if they're in charge of it, wouldn't that make sense why we've never been told?
Yeah, it's true. Or
Right?
they're just, our our consciousness has not changed to evolve to see them, to understand them, because
Right.
we're so at odds with ourselves,
Right.
right? We need to grow more. And I would even say that without UFOs, we just need to grow more as a society. Like, look what's happening right now. It's just it's so saddening. So I just hope we're going through the dark ages of it. And then once we get out, then I might not be able to see it, or I'll see it when I'm older, but I just hope that it gets better.
Well, my
So
mother's 91, and my mother goes, I hope I live to see disclosure, Danny. All right, Chrissy Newton,
I
thank
hope
you.
she does too.
I really do. And I said, Mom, if they land soon, I'm very nervous. I hope they don't land in my yard, Mom. Don't worry, they're not going to land in your yard. You'll be okay. Chrissy Newton, thank you very much for doing my dopey show. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you for having me.
next time you're in LA, we'll go to Musu and Frank's once again.
Always.
And
Always.
that's it. Stick around while just make sure the show uploads. Okay. That's
Okay,
it for
sounds
this
good.
week from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Thank you so very much. I'm Dan Harary. Check out HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. Check out thewowsignal.news. Check out DanHararyAuthor.com. Thank you.